Okay, so this video is actually about how to replace your refrigerant control valve on your 2010 or similar style Volkswagen. This one in particular is a Jetta. They're all kind of similar. Many of these things will actually kind of cross over car to car. But you didn't need to sit here and watch me figure out how to get this car onto the jack stands, this jack being a little too big, and probably should have just driven onto these 2x4s. But without further ado, let's get into it. As a professional, there are some big mistakes I want you to avoid, so please watch till the end of the video, and I hope it helps. Enjoy. As you can see, the first step is actually to rack the front part of the car up into the air so that you can access the undercover. And once you get access to that undercover, we're going to go ahead and take that off. And then after we take that off, then we really get to the meat of the whole job. For this job, this drill makes things so much easier. And the bits you're going to need with this are the T25 Torx and T30 Torx. Sometimes the Volkswagens have a bigger Torx for the rear bolts, but that's what you need for this particular car. So now we've found our valve. So our next step is to unplug the connector from the back side of this refrigerant control valve. Sometimes it goes easier, sometimes it's harder. I would say just get yourself a pocket screwdriver if it doesn't work, and then just kind of attack it from the other side as I'm doing here. And once you get it popped loose, it should just slip right off, and you'll see that right here. There you go. Just remember to be really gentle with that connector with the pocket screwdriver, but gently get in there, push the clip up, and you're good to go. And now it's time for a water break. And it's time to grab our special tool, our snap ring pliers. This will allow you to get the snap ring off of the compressor there at the control valve. It's a little tricky. I kind of recommend using a screwdriver along with these. I've never found a set that's super reliable, but nevertheless, this is your next step. Get those snap ring pliers in there, snag that snap ring, get it to pop off, and then we'll go from there.
Where's my pocket screw? Did it come off? Oh yeah, we got it.
Okay, the next step in this job is to actually get that valve out of the compressor. And as you see here, like I've got a couple of screwdrivers. I'm just kind of gently putting some pressure on that. If it cocks a little bit, sometimes it doesn't want to come out. So I just kind of get two angles on it so that I pull as straight as possible, and then boom, it pops out and you're good to go. I know it may look tight. It does kind of contact the fan, and you may have to adjust the fan blade to clear, but this will come out with that fan installed. Just be careful not to damage the fan. And now here's where you want to inspect the valve just to see if there are any shrapnel pieces, aluminum shrapnel, or anything like that in excess that would cause it to not work properly. So that's also the reason for this next step. You want to get a mirror and some light, and then get a look inside the compressor to make sure that there's no shrapnel or aluminum pieces inside the compressor as well. I'll be honest, it takes a lot of debris to cause this system to not work properly, but you always want to make sure that you check just to be sure that there's no massive amount of material in there that's going to just basically render your new valve inoperative. Once you've applied some PAG oil to the seals of the appropriate type, then you're going to go back in with the valve. Like I said, that fan does kind of get in the way. Be as careful as you can, but as you can see here, I'm kind of tilting it up, putting it in, and then twisting it to where the connector's oriented properly, and then I'm going to try to push it in. But even with the PAG oil, it's still going to fight you. And because it fights you, it's just not going to hit that last seal. There's like 3 seals you got to clear. And of course, because the space is so tight, it's extremely difficult to push hard enough on that valve to get it to go in there. Maybe you're stronger than I am, but I had to come up with an interesting apparatus. Let me take a moment and describe to you what I've done here. I took this screwdriver and I hooked it underneath that refrigerant line, and I put the collar of the screwdriver against the tip of that valve that you saw me pushing it on with my finger, and now I'm prying on it that way. That right there was the click of it seating all the way in. Hopefully I caught me prying this thing in. If not, it is what it is. I'll just describe to people what I did. While you watch me put the snap ring in here, I just want to make a critical point. If you do not seat this valve all the way, you cannot install this snap ring correctly. It's not possible, it won't work, and that would actually create a refrigerant leak relatively quickly, and you would lose all your refrigerant almost as soon as you charge it up. Of course, you would probably see that when you're pulling a vacuum on it, but just want to let you guys know that you have to make sure that this valve is seated. It's not easy to do with the compressor still in the car, but it is possible, as you saw. And here's the installation of the snap ring. What you see happening here is the same thing that I see happen with nearly all snap ring pliers sets that are like this. This is why the professionals and I like the fixed solid snap ring pliers for these kinds of things, because there's just too much flex to, get that ring seated without some like added encouragement. And right here, as you can see, I'm trying to use the pocket screwdriver for added encouragement. I think I am failing pretty miserably here. That's it. Cool. That concludes removal and install of the valve, and we'll move on to reassemble and evac and recharge. At this point, you might be thinking, come on, Mike, what in the world is taking you so long to reinstall this undercover here? Well, a point I'd like to make about these undercovers, and something I see a lot of guys do wrong often, is the tabs on the front that you saw are overlapping and underlapping, and you have to get each notch in the right place in order for it to kind of latch at the front side. And once you get it to latch at the front side, you line up the rear bolts first. And I just hand thread those in like you see me doing here. And then once those are hand threaded in, it just kind of holds it in place for you. And you can then kind of line up the other screws on the sides. Just so you know, it's super easy to miss the holes on the sides. So you just kind of have to be careful when you're putting those in. But here it goes. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and de-rack the car. I'm going to speed through this part because, well, it's really just irrelevant to the job that we're doing here. What's relevant is the part that we're about to get to, which is the evac and recharge component, where we're going to put it in a vacuum and we're going to leave it in a vacuum for 30 minutes to an hour. And what that does is it removes all of the moisture from the AC system. With all that moisture removed from the AC system, then we can then let it set for a little while and see if there are any massive major leaks. And once we've confirmed that there are no massive gaping holes in the AC system, while letting it sit in the vacuum for a few minutes, we'll then move forward with charging it back up with refrigerant. And so now we're going to go ahead and find these service valves. The caps, we'll remove those. And then we'll go ahead and hook up our gauges. I want to also share a pet peeve of mine, and that is don't lose these caps and don't leave them off. They do protect these AC service valves from getting dust and dirt caught in them. So once you get these gauges hooked up and set, the next thing you're going to want to do is hook up one of these vacuum pumps. And if you don't have a vacuum pump, I would recommend you just don't need to be doing the evac and recharge yourself. Ideally, you have a vacuum pump that you're going to pull a vacuum on, and a strong vacuum pump at that can get it close to 30 inches of mercury in vacuum and hold it there for another 30 minutes to an hour. But if you don't have that, like I said, go to a shop, have them do this part of the job, and have them pull the refrigerant out first, and then have them evac and recharge it when you're done with the job. It's worth paying them money to make sure you get it done right. And that will ensure that your refrigerant performance or your refrigeration system performance is as high as it possibly can be. Once you've got your vacuum pump hooked up, you want to open both of the valves on the gauges. Unfortunately, in this set, I've only got one valve to open. Then after 30 minutes to an hour, you want to close the valves back up. After a vacuum leak down check, you can go ahead and connect your can. I will give a disclaimer here. I'm a professional. I've done this a bunch of times. So I understand the nuances to this approach. I would recommend taking it to a professional to do this part. However, if you are doing it in the driveway, what I would say is you can tap into the can like I'm doing here. You can then open the can after, like while it's in the vacuum, to pull as much refrigerant into the system as possible until the pressures stop changing. And then once the pressure stopped changing, I would close the can off and then start the vehicle. And you'll see me do that here in just a moment. I'm going to start it up, and then once it's started, I'll give you a few more hints on things you want to make sure not to do and to do for this approach. As you can see there, the can kind of fell over when I started the car. The reason why this can be dangerous is because if you don't close the can off, liquid refrigerant can make its way through that low pressure line into the compressor. And in a lot of cases, if you just turn the can upside down and put it in through the low side line there, liquid refrigerant will be directly hitting that compressor, and it could blow your compressor up really easily. And it's a very expensive mistake to make. And that's one of the reasons why I recommend professionals do this part of the job for you if you're not familiar with it. But I'm going to go ahead and put a thermometer in here as I charge it the rest of the way. And the way that I'm going to charge it the rest of the way safely is I'm going to keep the can upright. I've put it in a hot part of the engine. So as the engine heats up, it'll heat that refrigerant up. And as a gas, it will push itself into the refrigeration system of the car. So you'll see the gauge will go down as it pulls the refrigerant into the AC system. And the way that you'll know how much refrigerant has gone into the system is the can will actually sweat on the outside, and it'll actually freeze some of the droplets of condensation on the outside of the can. And it'll be at the level that the refrigerant is at until the can is gone. And then of course you have to know exactly how much refrigerant goes in, and then you kind of have to you have to sort of guess at it with the can approach. It's so much better to have a machine or a scale where you know exactly how much refrigerant is going in there. But since I've evac and recharged, these cars so many times, I have a pretty good idea of how much is going in and what the effect is going to be. As you see here, I'm getting a second can because the spec on this car is 1.15 pounds or 5.525 kilograms. And so I need a second can. And once you're done filling the refrigeration system, which, like I said, you want to be as precise as you possibly can be within that margin of error. There's like a plus or minus 0.025 kilograms. You close off the low side valve, which is the only one that should be open while you're doing all this. And after closing off that low side valve, you're going to shut the car off and then monitor how long it takes for the pressures to equalize. However, before you shut the car off, I like to detach that low side line because it keeps more of the refrigerant in the system. So if you're doing it this way with the regular gauges, you take that low side line off while the pressure is low, and you leave the car running, and then you shut it off and then watch how fast the pressures equalize from there. So the reason why you want to watch the gauges after you shut it off is because how long it takes to equalize these pressures will tell you, is there another blockage in the system or possibly an expansion valve that's sticking or partially plugged. Like those are all problems that you could encounter in these AC systems. And so you just want to kind of double check, triple check, make sure, oh, hey, like, yeah, my pressures have equalized. They do so relatively quickly. And that's what I'm pointing to here. Last but not least, detach that high side line for your gauge set. Make sure you reinstall those caps as I mentioned earlier and apply the finishing touches and you are done.